back to the Brittany Hughes Show. Happy Thursday, everybody. So President Joe Biden's immigration line is completely falling apart, kind of like his immigration policies, which were never actually designed to work. We all know that at this point. It's long been clear that the left will stop at absolutely nothing short of completely open borders, totally limitless illegal immigration. They do not care. They do not care how many people come in. They do not care how many people overstay their visas, how many people never show up to their immigration hearings. The entire system is designed to be a completely open system for rampant illegal immigration, and they are getting their wish. All while they tacitly throw out policies that they claim are designed to secure the border or to help stem the tide or to somewhat placate even people on their own side, like Mayor Eric Adams in New York City is now finding out, who are saying, dang, you know what? This is a little bit unsustainable. Might want to do something about this. And so even leftists are starting to realize that this is a completely untenable situation, which is completely and totally of their own making. All of these sanctuary cities that clamored for years, accusing every single Republican governor, Republican mayor, anybody that even suggested we get a handle on our border, accusing them of Nazism, of xenophobia, of racism. Now they're getting what they asked for with all of these people showing up on their doorsteps. And the Biden administration is having to pretend like they care about this issue, having to pretend like they're doing something, at least nominally, about this crisis. But the numbers tell a different story. As a matter of fact, the situation has gotten so bad that in Texas, Governor Greg Abbott, Republican, of course, who has spent the last year or so coming under left-wing fire for daring to bus a relatively few number of illegal aliens to cities like Chicago and D.C. and Boston and New York City, to give them a little bit of a taste of what his state deals with every single day at the border. Now Texas has erected, and I'm sure you've seen it in the news, the media is wringing their hands and clutching their pearls over it, a barrier in the Rio Grande River that is comprised of some barrels, some buoys. It is a net that is weighted to the bottom of the river, and largely it's meant to deter two things. The first, the main thing that it's meant to deter, are small vessels that are used by human traffickers to load up a whole bunch of people. You should see these things absolutely overflowing with bodies on the Mexican side of the Rio Grande and ferry them across the river, dumping them on the bank of the United States, where these people then clamber up the side of a muddy riverbank, turn themselves over to Border Patrol, and now they become our problem. So that's issue number one. The second and somewhat more dangerous issue, because all of this is dangerous, right? There's no way to get into the United States illegally that does not involve some form of danger, which again, leftists don't really seem to care about unless they can accuse Republicans of posing the danger. The barrier is also meant to stop people from simply walking across the river. Of course, where this barrier is erected, it would be very difficult to walk across the river. It's much deeper in this section, but people do attempt to swim, and there are people that die every single year trying to get across this river. It's incredibly dangerous, especially for young children that oftentimes have absolutely no say in whether or not they are being brought across the United States and their lives are being put at risk. And so again, we've got an administration that doesn't care at all about the danger that is posed to these migrants trying to get to the United States, doesn't care at all that they are exacerbating this situation and they are encouraging people to make this very difficult, very perilous journey to the United States by having open border policies that basically say, look, if you get here, we will let you in. And quite frankly, we don't really care what you do after you get here, because you're going to get an immigration hearing so far in the future that you're probably going to forget all about it if you ever plan to show up in the first place, which is unlikely. All of these policies are encouraging people to come to the United States unlawfully. And Texas has finally had enough. This has become an unmanageable situation. Ever since Joe Biden took office, we enjoyed 4 years under Donald Trump with illegal immigration falling to historically low levels. Still wasn't perfect. Problem still wasn't solved. But at least it was becoming more manageable. At least there was somebody in office looking at the situation saying, we're going to at least try as best we can. Courts notwithstanding, leftist, politicians notwithstanding, we're going to do the best that we can to get this situation under control. And then in comes Joe Biden, and the whole thing gets reversed. And next thing you know, we have historic levels of illegal immigration. So Texas finally put something in the water that says we're going to try to deter people from coming across this way. You say we can't build a wall. We can at least put an underwater fence. And then what we saw this past week has been nothing short of absolutely vile. So 2 bodies this past week washed up in the Rio Grande, were recovered from the Rio Grande, and they were kind of sort of near this buoy barrier that had been erected. But that's not the way that the media painted the picture. The media, according to media hysteria, painted the picture that 2 dead bodies had been caught by this barrier, that these people had died because of Abbott's underwater fence. They had tried to make the journey across it, ended up getting tangled up or cut up or whatever, and ended up drowning in the Rio Grande.
Tonight, tragedy in Texas. 2 migrants dying in the Rio Grande. And now a dispute over where it happened. Mexico says a body was found stuck in one of these controversial floating barriers Texas installed to stop illegal border crossings. Buoys the Biden administration is suing to remove, citing a danger to migrants. But Texas Governor Greg Abbott says the Mexican government is flat out wrong. Preliminary information points to the drowning occurring before the body was even near the barriers.
And media outlets that wanted to run with this story cited Mexico's government, who blamed the deaths on this underwater fence. Now, it's funny that the Mexican government and the Mexican president that was just, going off about these 2 poor people that lost their lives in this river. And all of a sudden, the Mexican government cares so much about lives and accuses Abbott of killing these 2 people. And how dare you, risk the lives of migrants who are just trying to get to your country in search of a better life. Interesting that the Mexican government doesn't seem to give a rip about all of the migrants that lose their lives every single year, if not every single day, trying to get through Mexico into the United States. They don't care about all of the people that die trying to get through the desert, or that are murdered and raped and assaulted by the human traffickers and the cartels that basically run that country. They don't care. They don't care about the people that pile atop a moving train to get to the border. They don't care about all those people. Tons of people die on this journey all of the time, and the Mexican government only seems to care when they can blame the Republican governor of Texas for these 2 people. Interesting when human lives matter. And of course, the left only cares when they can blame Abbott. The left only cares when they can blame Republicans, and the media only cares. They don't care when small children are being thrown over border walls. They don't care when bodies of migrants are packing out the morgues in Arizona. They don't care when children are found dead in the desert or in overheated 18-wheelers. They don't care about any of those lives. But you find a body in a net that's been set up in the Rio Grande to try to stop these tragedies. All of a sudden, the media is wringing their hands over migrant deaths. Except here's the problem. Texas authorities, who were the ones that actually found and recovered and autopsied these bodies, they say that these deaths were completely unrelated to the barrier. Here are the actual facts behind this case. One of the bodies, a Honduran boy, terribly, terribly sad, was found near the barrier, but medical examiners say that he was clearly dead long before he was found and that his body had floated downstream and was caught by the net.
We've received preliminary information that the person drowned underneath one of the international bridges in Eagle Pass, and then their body floated to the area of the buoys. An exact cause of death and identity have not been released yet. Mexican authorities recovered the body and will now perform an autopsy.
This was completely unrelated to the physical barrier. He did not die because he got caught by this thing. And the evidence clearly showed that. The other body wasn't even recovered near the barrier. It was recovered 3 miles from it and was clearly unrelated. But that's not the story that you hear from the media. That's not the story that you hear from opportunistic leftists who want to exploit this tragedy and use it as a political weapon. Here's Beto O'Rourke, who, of course, is a failed candidate in so many respects. It's not even funny. This guy loses everything he ever endeavored. Honestly, this is one of the few biological males that could compete in women's sports, and genuinely I would not be concerned because he loses everything he ever tries. But that doesn't stop him from getting on social media and blathering on about things he doesn't know about anyway. Here he is flatly accusing Abbott of killing people over on X, the platform formerly known as Twitter, which quite frankly, I think that this amounts to basically slander. Here he is. Abbott is killing people. Who's going to stop him? Except that's not at all what the evidence shows. Doesn't stop him from flat out lying about it, though. And here's why. Here's why they have to lie. Here's why they have to take this and spin it and make it into something that it's not. 2 people are dead. Dead. Likely because they were trying to come into the United States illegally, not because they were caught by offense, not because some preventive measure put in place by the United States to help protect itself and its sovereignty against people who would exploit our immigration laws and completely ignore them and violate them. Not that the current administration really cares about them anyway. But there are 2 people that tragically lost their lives. And rather than recognize that for what it is, rather than recognize that this happens all the time at our southwest border, all the time, if not in the river, then on a train, then in the desert, then on some highway. This is a common occurrence. It is horrible, it is tragic, and it is exacerbated and encouraged by open border policies. But they can't admit that. So instead, they try to link it to this fence that's been put up that, quite frankly, when looked at in the totality of how big our border is and how open it is and how exploitable it is actually a fairly relatively small preventive measure. And they have to target it because it works. See, that's the thing, is whenever Texas or Arizona, whenever anybody does anything that works, border walls, they work. They work in other countries. As a matter of fact, we've sent over foreign aid to help other countries build them. Can't seem to build one here, though. Border walls work. Underwater netting works. Busing migrants to blue cities to give them a taste of what their own sanctuary policies is driving works. And anytime there is a policy put in place that actually starts to make a dent in this problem, or at least call attention to this problem, the left has to target it. It's inhumane. It's killing people. Doesn't matter if it actually is. We're going to say that it is. It's racist. It's horrific. Because the left cannot allow any of these methods to be proven effective. And they know it. And the administration, meanwhile, is just taking to flat out lying and deceiving the American public about what's happening at the border. Because again, Biden spent the first 2 years of his administration overseeing such a massive border crisis that even leftists were getting concerned. When you have people packing out border facilities, when you have people standing in sweltering lines in triple-digit heat, that doesn't really look good optically. But the Biden administration couldn't put policies in place to actually deter illegal immigration because that doesn't go along with their party line, right? That's not what Biden promised. That's not what leftists want. So instead, they just had to fudge the way that they're doing the math. So here's what they did. The administration has used apprehension numbers over this past summer to claim that illegal immigration actually dropped after the expiration of Title 42. You remember that Trump-era program that allowed for the immediate expulsion of a lot of illegal aliens? That thing expired. And all of a sudden, magically, after months of predicting that that would cause an enormous surge at the border, suddenly illegal immigration seemed to vanish overnight. And here was the Biden administration saying, look, that giant catastrophe that you guys predicted, that didn't happen. As a matter of fact, numbers are lower than they've ever been. And they're using it to claim that the launch of Biden's in-country asylum programs and all of these new policies that the White House has enacted that has allowed illegal aliens to start the asylum process before coming into the U.S., all of them are working to deter illegal immigration. Except here's the problem. It hasn't. Not even a little bit. Former acting commissioner of Customs and Border Protection, Mark Morgan, said during a weekend interview with the National Desk that part of the reason that illegal alien apprehensions appear down is because Border Protection, at the direction of the Biden administration, is diverting these migrants to ports of entry rather than tabulating them as border jumpers. And it makes it look like the border has been secured and that migration is now happening in a more neat and orderly fashion, except that's not true at all.
Well, first of all, I think what it represents that this administration is not being honest with American people. Scott alerted a long time ago that the intentional omission of a material fact is the same thing as a lie. And what they're not doing, they're using a sleight of hand like a good magician to get us to focus on only what's happening at our southwest border. Meanwhile, what they're not telling you is what's happening across the nation. And right now, this fiscal year, we're on track for over 3 million nationwide encounters. That's a 360% increase from when they took over in the past 29 months. Second to that is what's very, very important is what they begin to do is divert those that were previously entering in between the ports of entry, and they're simply diverting them to the ports of entry, and then they're claiming victory. And in reality, it's a big shell game.
For example, let's look at the numbers. In March, of the 193,262 illegal aliens, let's just say about 193,000, who were apprehended by both U.S. Border Patrol, which deals with the areas between ports of entry at the border, and the Office of Field Operations, which handles checkpoints. Okay, so you've got these two agencies, right, dealing with immigration. You've got Border Patrol that handles the wide open spaces between ports of entry. And then you've got the Office of Field Operations that handles the actual ports of entry, the checkpoints, places where people are supposed to come through. Of those 193,000, 163,677 illegal aliens, or about 85%, were caught between ports of entry. In April, about 87% were caught between ports of entry. In May, about 83% were caught between ports of entry. And this goes back, you can look for months of Border Patrol data. The vast majority, between about 80 and 90%, give or take, in any given month, of illegal aliens are caught between ports of entry. They're not trying to come through a checkpoint, right? What good would that do? That's not how they're getting here. They're not coming through a highway. They're not coming down a road. They're climbing up the banks of the Rio Grande. They're walking through the desert. They're climbing over the rocks. That's how they're getting here. Now, they turn themselves into Border Patrol. It's not that they don't think they're going to get caught. Matter of fact, they want to get apprehended because then they get their little golden ticket into the U.S. But they're coming between ports of entry, and this has been standard. Everybody has understood this. But see, then in June, the White House and the media bragged that the number of illegal alien apprehensions dropped below 100,000 for the first time in about 2 years. Yay, us! Illegal aliens, illegal immigration is finally under control. We ended Title 42. The stupid conservatives said that it was going to blow the doors open for illegal immigration, and look at us, it hasn't. Can we have a cookie now? In fact, CBP data show that U.S. Border Patrol alone made only 99,545 encounters that month. Still pretty high, but under 100,000 for the first time in a couple of years, practically since Biden first took office. Here's the Washington Post calling the border eerily quiet since the end of Title 42. Except, see, this doesn't tell the whole story, not by a long shot. Including the Office of Field Operations, remember those guys that handle the checkpoints? Yeah. 144,571 illegal aliens were caught in June. Of those, only 68% were reportedly caught between ports of entry. Meaning that month, the percentage of illegal alien apprehensions that occurred between ports of entry magically dropped from about 85%, give or take, in any given month, to just 68%. Now, why is that? Why all of a sudden do people who traditionally were coming between ports of entry because there was no reason to try to pass through a checkpoint, that didn't amount to a hill of beans, why all of a sudden are all of those people now being funneled through a checkpoint? Well, part of this is because of a new app called CBP1, which was launched around the time that Title 42 was ended to try to be a measure to offset the flood. This is an app that migrants across the border in Mexico can use to request an appointment to check in legally and be admitted to the United States while they then wait for their immigration hearing, which can take years if they ever show up at all. The program, which again is an app on your smartphone, like ordering from Chick-fil-A, the program allows in up to 40,000 migrants per month. Meaning the drop in illegal immigration doesn't actually mean a drop in border crossers, just the number of people being calculated as border crossers. So all of these people that otherwise would have been counted as border jumpers, as long as they've checked in on this app and get funneled through a checkpoint, same people, same thing they're doing. They're just hitting a button on a smartphone first. But see, here's the problem. Like with so many things run by the federal government, I don't know, things like the Obamacare website, for example, this app is glitchy. Illegal aliens trying to use it say that they sometimes have to wait for weeks just to get an appointment, while others who showed up after them get in just fine. This thing doesn't seem to work very well. A lot of people are trying to figure out how to use it. It doesn't seem to be a very tried and true method of making an appointment. On top of that, immigration advocate groups say that this program is unlawful to begin with because they say that migrants can just claim asylum after crossing the border anyway, which isn't actually true according to our federal immigration law. If you can read the plain black and white language, but whatever, we actually have a definition of asylum that the vast majority of these people do not meet, and they're also supposed to claim it as soon as they get to the first safe place after leaving their own home country, which should be Mexico, if the Mexican government is so concerned about their health and safety. So they actually don't meet the definition of asylees to begin with, but that's of course not what advocates for illegal immigration say. So now they're taking the feds to court and challenging this program altogether. So the bottom line here is that we still have droves of illegal aliens, same exact people, same exact numbers. They are pouring over the border with no end in sight, and the White House is trying to gaslight the American public into believing that it's not happening by basically changing the way that they do the math and by redefining the term illegal entry. These are the same people crossing the same border. They're just checking in on a smartphone before they do it. And just like with all of the in-country asylum and parole programs that have failed in the past, migrants who want a quick and easy way into the United States are starting to bypass this line. They're blowing off the glitchy and frustrating app that they say makes them wait too long and are simply starting to come in the old-fashioned way. We have seen this before under the Obama administration. We've seen it under the Biden administration. They launched these programs saying, we're going to set up a program in your country where you don't even have to leave Venezuela or Guatemala or Honduras or El Salvador or wherever you're at. You can go ahead and apply for asylum while you're there, and then we will, in a timely and orderly fashion, get you into the United States. The problem is that just like with our legal immigration system that doesn't seem to be good enough for these people, that forces a wait. You have to wait in line. Those programs get backlogged. It doesn't happen overnight. And so people get frustrated with those programs. They get frustrated with the glitchy app that they say doesn't work well, or that they have to spend weeks trying to get this magical appointment or whatever. And so they finally say, the heck with your program, the heck with your app. I'm going to come in the old-fashioned way. I'm going to cross that river or I'm going to cross that desert and I'm just going to walk up. And that's exactly what you're starting to see. This happens every single time some leftist tries to launch some new program that's supposed to make this easier for people. It ends up getting completely bungled, completely jammed up, and then gets ignored. The preliminary July numbers from Customs and Border Protection showed 137,000 apprehensions on the southwest border in between ports of entry in July. That's a 38% increase from June. In Tucson, Arizona, border agents apprehended 40,000 illegal aliens in the month of July alone. That is the highest monthly total for that sector in 15 years. Of course, what's also insanely high is how much you're probably paying for health insurance for coverage that you might not need, all while your money goes to subsidize medical costs for things you don't agree with. Every single year, millions of Americans just like you pay exorbitant premiums for health coverage that you don't even use, only for that money to fund things like abortions or gender surgery for minors. So if you don't want to see your hard-earned cash going to pay for things that violate your beliefs, and you also want to keep more money in your own pocket, you need Share Healthcare. I'm partnering with Share Healthcare to let people know about their cost-sharing, cost-saving program that connects people of like values and that can give you the health coverage you need without compromising your beliefs. And with plans that start as low as $149 a month, Sleeping Easy just got even more affordable. So check out sharehealthcare.com, enter the referral code MRCTV23. That's sharehealthcare.com, MRCTV23, and find a plan that's right for you today. Unfortunately, even as money is exiting your wallet, the opposite is true for illegal aliens because many of them are being allowed in. And that's the entire point, is it not? According to the Transactional Records Access Clearinghouse, or TRAC, at Syracuse University, this is a long-standing program that's been used to track immigration data for a long time. It uses data that's obtained from the Executive Office for Immigration Review. According to TRAC, 671,721 migrants, let's just round up to 672,000 migrants, have been let into the U.S. so far in 2023 alone. And we're not done with 2023, by the way. For those of you checking your calendar, it's just now the beginning of August. 672,000 migrants allowed into the United States since January 1st. And every day that number grows even bigger. Even as the Biden administration bragged about a 70% drop in border crossings following the end of Title 42, again, which we just talked about, was deceptive, and it was offset by the number of people that were being allowed in and not checked off as border crossers because they had checked in on an app first. Track data showed the opposite, showed 118,520 new asylum cases were referred to immigration courts across the nation in June, the fifth highest number recorded since 2001. So that would be an interesting riddle for the Biden administration. If illegal immigration is dropping, then why are the number of new asylum cases being referred to immigration courts also going up in record numbers that same exact month? Well, maybe because you're fudging the numbers and you're lying about how many people you're actually allowing into the country. Again, largely because many people who just a month before would have been classified as illegal aliens were not counted as unlawful border crossers thanks to having checked in with this CBP-1 app. Now, altogether, between those who've been allowed into the U.S. and those who are known to have entered without being apprehended, which we catch on surveillance cameras all the time, an estimated 2.6 million migrants have made it into the United States since Biden first took office in January of 2021. 2.6 million people. We don't know who they are. We don't know their backgrounds. We don't know their education or their skill set. To start, we don't know their criminal history or their intent. And by the way, these are not all from Latin America, although the vast majority of them are because they have the convenience of a land bridge. These are from over 100 countries all across the world, including countries that are hostile to this nation. And the crowds that are showing up in places like New York City and overwhelming their migrant shelters prove that this is an ongoing crisis regardless of what this administration wants you to believe. Here's the scene, for example, outside the Roosevelt Hotel in New York City, which has been packed full of migrants to the point where now migrants are sleeping on the streets, camped out on the sidewalks, 3-4 people deep. Taxpayers have forked out $104.6 million in FEMA funding for New York City's Shelter and Services program to start housing illegal aliens. By the way, if you're over there laughing about how New York City is dealing with this problem and how funny it is that all of these people are getting dumped on their doorstep, on the one hand, it is interesting to see blue cities start to buckle under the weight of what border towns deal with every single day and to get a taste of their own medicine. But here's the problem. You and I who don't live in New York City, we end up footing the bill bill because FEMA, courtesy of the Biden administration, is now giving tens of millions of dollars to this city to help them deal with the crisis that they basically invited through their sanctuary policies themselves. As far as I'm concerned, I would look at New York City and say, look, you voted for this, you wanted it, your problem. But that's not what the Biden administration is doing, because now you have a blue city with a Democrat mayor squawking at the top of his lungs about how this is a problem because it's now landed in his backyard, and the Democrat president that we have in office can't have his mayors turning on him. So we'll send them some money to fix this situation, and that money comes courtesy of us. So it is our problem. By the way, if you're sending FEMA funding to a city to help them deal with the migrant crisis, you can't really call it not an emergency, because that's literally what FEMA is for. It's for emergency. It's the emergency management. It's literally in the title. So on the one hand, you've got administration saying, we've got this thing under control. The border is secured. It's not open to illegal immigration. We've got a nice new policy that lets people come in an orderly fashion. Oh, and by the way, New York, here's your emergency money, because they're blowing the doors off of that place. Talking out of two sides of your mouth here. The city has about 56,000 migrants already packed into its homeless shelters and its hotels, and now the city is opening new shelters like the one at McCarran Play Center. A play center, isn't that lovely? Where about 50 migrants are being housed and given catered Venezuelan food, snacks, drinks, bathroom and shower access, free Wi-Fi and international calling, and a pass to the pool. This is nicer than some apartment complexes that I've lived in, quite frankly. And this is just one of several shelters that the city is having to set up. Another 60 migrant men have been placed in Brooklyn's Sunset Park Recreation Center. On Monday, New York City officials confirmed plans to construct a migrant shelter for 2,000 men on Randall Island's children's soccer fields. Again, why do the kids get booted out of their spaces? Interesting. We're going to set them up in children's soccer fields and play centers and across from elementary schools. These are fields that were originally built for neighborhood kids to have a safe place to play and practice sports, by the way, but no longer, because we need them for all of the migrant men. You might wonder why why they're setting up all of these shelters for men. It's because the vast majority of illegal aliens that come across into the United States are men. They're not women and toddlers, as the left would have you believe. They're not just families fleeing to a better life, women clutching babies to their chest as they try to get over, Greg Abbott's razor wire that he has set up so inhumanely in the river. That's not what's happening here. We're talking about adult or 17, 18-year-old young men. The vast majority, they make up the largest single percentage of illegal aliens coming into this country every single day. They have for a long time. That's a known and documented fact. But again, the left doesn't want to talk about that. So instead, we just send millions of dollars in FEMA funding to New York City to build them some shelters, and we boot the kids off of the soccer fields and out of their play structures, and hope that that just kind of quietly takes care of the problem. It doesn't. New Yorkers are getting really upset about this, by the way. Even people that probably are likely to be leftists themselves don't really like it when their neighborhood gets overtaken by a whole bunch of people that clearly have absolutely no respect for our immigration law whatsoever. But here's the problem. They're not going anywhere anytime soon. According to the New York Post, asylum hearings for newly arriving migrants are being set as far as 5 years into the future. And again, that's if they show up at all. 5 years into the future. In the meantime, you're supposed to enroll your kids, if you have any, into the public school system. Doesn't matter that they don't speak English. Doesn't matter that they are not educated to the grade level that corresponds with their age. Doesn't matter that taxpayer dollars, which these people are not paying into, are now having to be used to educate these children and having to catch them up, being used to get translators and ESL teachers, and draining the resources from schools that are already buckling to deal with the children from this country that they already have. Doesn't matter that all of our education system is being overloaded. Doesn't matter that our welfare and handout system is being overloaded. Doesn't matter that our structure in this country is not designed and cannot sustain a mass influx of illegal aliens with absolutely no cap whatsoever. Because we're supposed to buy that all of this is great. The border is secure, the masses are being allowed in, but all of this is okay because they checked in on an app first. New York is being packed out. Everything is good though because hashtag diversity is our strength. And what is America if not a melting pot? Let me tell you something about diversity. Diversity is not a blanket positive, no matter what the left tells you. The left likes to take terms and apply these wide, broad definitions to them so that they can pack people into categories of people we support and people we're supposed to hate. They do this with terms like discrimination. Discrimination has become a 4-letter word. All discrimination is bad. If you discriminate, there's something wrong with you. You are hateful and you are bigoted, except people discriminate all the time. When you choose where to send your child to school, you're discriminating. You're making a choice between one school and the other. Every time you go to the grocery store and you decide between Utz potato chips and Lay's potato chips, you're discriminating. You're making a choice based on your preferences, what you like the best, and what you need in that situation. People discriminate all the time. We discriminate when we choose who to date. There's no law saying that we have to date anybody who asks us out, right? We're allowed to discriminate. We're allowed to say, yeah, I think that person fits what I'm looking for. That person, not so much. We discriminate all the time. Discrimination is not only a regular and common, but a necessary function of human beings. And yet the left has cast that term as if you discriminate, if you make a choice, particularly in certain categories, that automatically makes you evil. And they do the same exact thing with diversity. Diversity is our strength. Diversity is a positive. You can't have enough diversity, and if you don't like diversity, there's something wrong with you, and you're hateful, and you're xenophobic, and you're racist, even though none of this has anything to do with race. Diversity is not always a blanket positive. There is some diversity that is fantastic. It's great to have a diversity of culinary options, for example. It's fantastic that when you're driving down the road with your family, you can choose between the, taco restaurant or the lasagna shop or whatever. There are lots of examples of how different cultures and different ethnicities bring a diverse set of characteristics to a society that are beneficial. That's not a bad thing. People from different places around the globe that bring different experiences, different insights is not necessarily a bad thing. Some of the best stories that I have ever heard are people that come to America from places that are complete opposites of America, places where the government is oppressive, places where women can't get education, places where people can't find jobs or the economy is absolute garbage, and legal immigrants who come to this country seeking the American dream, seeking to assimilate into America because they recognize that there is something different about here that they want. They don't want to bring what they came from. They want what we have here. And they're looking to come be a part of that. Some of the best stories that I have ever heard are from immigrants who come from something so radically different from here. And they bring a diverse perspective on the blessings and prosperity of this country. And I think that's fantastic. There are certain aspects of diversity that are good, but there are certain aspects of diversity that are not good. You don't want diversity when it comes to, for example, respect for the rule of law. If you have diversity in a society where some people uphold the rule of law, respect the rule of law, think that it means something, they adhere to it, they recognize the role that it plays in keeping the structure of society together, and you couple that with a panorama of people that, they pick and choose what laws they like. They think that some of them make kind of sense and then some of them not so much. And then you've got people that don't think the law applies to them whatsoever and completely disregard it. When you have diversity of thought and belief, when it comes to respect for the rule of law, now you have chaos. Congratulations. That kind of diversity is not good. It's kind of like, and I make this comparison a lot. It's maybe not necessarily always a perfect one, but it seems to fit to me. That it's kind of like an HOA. If you live in a neighborhood that has a strong HOA, it can be kind of a pain in the butt sometimes, right? Because there are restrictions, there are rules that you are expected to follow, there are guidelines. You can't just go out and build a fence if you want. You can't just go out and chop down a tree if you want. You can't just go paint your front door turquoise if you want, right? You have to adhere to the guidelines of the HOA. But the good news is that your neighbor also can't just go out and paint his front door lime green, right? He can't go do something that is unsightly and brings the entire aesthetic of the neighborhood down that you then have to stare at all day. We had this in a neighborhood that I once lived in, where it was a very nice neighborhood. Everybody generally kept up their homes, mowed their lawn, houses looked very nice, but there was that one house. There's always that one house, isn't there? That one house, and we did not have a strong HOA. There was nobody policing anything. And so you had the one house that, Lord bless them, for whatever reason, there were always half a dozen cars parked out in the front lawn, like rusted lawn ornaments. There was a half-inflated kiddie pool that sat out next to the driveway. There was a completely unattended pet cemetery parked right smack dab next to the road. It was absolutely atrocious. And I remember that there was this nice, neat house across the street from this absolute abomination. And it was this wonderful, very well-kept house. And every single time I passed that house, I always felt terrible for the people who lived in it, not only because they had to get up every single morning and stare across the street and look at the garbage that was piling up in this house across from them, but also because all I could think was, if I were a home buyer and these people ever sold their home and I came to look at it, there is no way I would want to live there. Despite how nice that house was, despite how well tended that house was, I wouldn't want to purchase something that looked out at blight. And so who's going to purchase a house like that? Well, somebody that doesn't mind the blight, right? Because anybody that does isn't going to move into it. Well, then you get somebody in that house that doesn't mind the blight and lets their house go. And next thing you know, over years, that's how once great neighborhoods end up coming down. And this is exactly what happens when you allow the wrong kind of diversity, and you allow it in droves that are unmanageable. And by the way, this has nothing to do with race. This has nothing to do with ethnicity. This has nothing to do with skin color. Every single human being on planet Earth is created in the image of God. All men are created equal, but all cultures are not. Okay, all cultures are not created equal. You can look back throughout history at some of the most heinous, barbaric cultures known to man. And there is no way that you would say that that culture was equal in ethics, in morality, in basic decency to what we have built in Western civilization. Now, please understand me. I am by no means holding Western civilization, in particular the United States of America, as the gold standard of perfection. We have a lot of problems, namely the stain of abortion on this country, the fact that we murder infant children to the tune of thousands a day. There are barbaric practices in the United States, but generally speaking, Western civilization, over time and over years, has created a culture, has created a society that generally has, at least in when looked at in the history of humanity, a respect for humans, a respect for people's rights, a respect for property, a respect for structure, a respect for basic decency. Sometimes seems to be going out the window these days, but generally speaking, Western civilization has achieved that in ways that had not been seen before in human history. And when you open the door saying that all diversity is fantastic, to mindsets, to habits, to ways of thinking, to cultural norms that have no interest whatsoever in assimilating into America. It's not like you're leaving behind what you're trying to flee in order to come here and discover something better and be a part of it. Because so often that is not what's happening. People who come into this country legally, at the very least from the onset, are declaring by the very fact that they are coming legally that they already have a respect for the rule of law, which is what it starts with. I'm not talking about what you eat. I'm not talking about what music you listen to, what language you speak at home. I'm not talking about any of that. I'm talking about the basic fundamental tenets of a society that have to be agreed upon by the majority of the general populace in order for a society to function. And it starts with respect for the rule of law. And when you come to a country legally, you are declaring, I respect your country, your national sovereignty, your rule of law, the procedure that you have laid out for me to come here. And I respect it enough to abide by it and do this the lawful way. When you come into a country illegally, the very first declaration that you are making is, I do not care about your system. I do not care about your laws. I do not care about your rules. And if that is the case, then why should I expect you to care about any of the rules and any of the laws in this country once you get here? How should I expect you to assimilate into a country that you have automatically declared you do not respect? And diversity, when it comes to a disrespect for the system, the rule of law, a disrespect for the country that you are demanding take you in, that kind of diversity is not the kind I want in this country, and it's not the kind that is going to lead to anything good. This will be a nation in decline if we believe that all kinds of diversity is positive, and therefore we should open up the floodgates to anything and everything, because we're not allowed to discriminate. We're not allowed to say we want this, we don't want that. We're not allowed to put parameters on anything. Again, only country in the world that is expected by ourselves and everybody else across the globe to completely ignore our own national sovereignty. Every other country gets to have borders and gets to shut them down or say who comes in and who comes out, but not the United States of America. For some reason, we are the only country that's supposed to just come one, come all. And if it's going to be the death of New York City, you can bet it's not going to stop there. And with that, that's the Brittany Hughes Show for this Thursday. Thank you guys for joining me. I'll see you guys back here next Thursday. In the meantime, make sure you head over to Apple Podcasts, hit the subscribe button on the Brittany Hughes Show. That way you won't ever miss an episode. Also, subscribe to the Newsbusters podcast with Tim Graham. That one's on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. And don't forget to check out sharehealthcare.com if you are sick of paying a ton of money for coverage that you don't need for healthcare, but you don't want to spend a whole bunch of money to subsidize other people's abortions. Doesn't sound like a fun time. So sharehealthcare.com, MRCTV 23 is the referral code there. I will see you guys back here next Thursday. Have a blessed weekend.